I thought I'd start my Sizzle Reel off with an interview I did back in 2018 of a founding CEO of a relatively unknown company that is now omnipresent in our lives.
What's the experience that's different with your product versus something else? What's the ease of use for us who haven't used it?
Like the Tesla cars, right? You compare the Tesla with any other cars, from all the side of perspective, they're all cars. But until you drive a Tesla, you will see, wow, its experience is very different. The reason why is the architecture is different, right? So when we build a Zoom, our architecture is a video-first architecture. Look at any other solutions, either data collaboration or the audio, peer-to-peer audio network. Zoom takes a totally different architecture.
You know, job losses in the United States because of COVID-19, and there seems to be a continued disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street.
You know, nobody comes out and rings the bell when it's all over, but I think at some point there's going to be a big agonizing reappraisal, let's put it that way.
What's your view right now in terms of perhaps what cities will look like, how we will do business, and the impact of that?
I think flexibility is going to be the operative word for any business owner.
What is your reaction to the news today? Is it warranted or not?
You know, my heart bleeds for everyone else in the small business world that is facing the reality that our industry has faced.
Having been at the beginning of NAFTA, creating NAFTA with Ronald Reagan, what is your reaction and message to those who are really starting to pull back a little bit here?
All of the arguments against, all, without exception, have turned out to be false. 25 years later, just look at what's happening in Canada. And look at what has happened. You want to get defeated fast in Canada in an election campaign? Go into the next election and campaign and say, I'm going to cancel the Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement, or I'm going to cancel NAFTA.
We just want more fair trading and reciprocal trading with our trading partners. You don't buy that at all?
Well, everybody wants fair trade. But like beauty, fair is in the definition of fair is in the eye of the beholder.
But it's almost as though there's a 3D chess game going on right now, and it actually starts with the G7 and the bizarre ending we had. What do you make of it?
Instead of being petulant and saying, my goodness, he doesn't behave properly, he's slapping us around, we have to figure out how to deal with that. We have to figure out how do we take more marbles off the table than he does.
If you take a look at the economy in Germany right now, they have declined their growth outlook. They are impacted. Europe is getting impacted. We're seeing the implications falling out right now. So give us a little bit more granularity, having been on Wall Street for 30 years, what you see as the economic implications.
Well, we're definitely seeing international economies slow down. The U.S. is probably at a tipping point, not that we'll go negative, but the growth rate is definitely not nearly at the 4+% rates that we saw earlier this year.
But Don, you know, when you think about Canada and how important it is to be competitive globally, we do talk about the U.S. having a lower corporate tax rate, Canada on the higher side, also from an individual perspective, brain drain, etc. To be truly competitive or more competitive with a new finance minister in place, what would be one or two suggestions if you were an advisor that you would want to see, that you could think would be a bit of a game changer?
If you look at the future prosperity of Canada, we need to be making things here. We need to reduce government overhead, government regulation, encourage the private sector, and create more than we buy from outside the country. So it's all about innovation and attracting and keeping the best people. So I know it's popular to get elected to say we're going to tax wealthy more, we're going to tax companies more. If you can't just keep doing that, because you'll eventually lose the companies and lose the high-income people.
You know, it seems, Brian, there's been a lot of skeptics in as it relates to the Canadian banking system, not even system, but just the results that we could potentially get. And we continue to see results defy expectations. What would you say to skeptics?
Well, I think the narrative around energy has been overdone, and I think that the Canadian economy has been the narrative around the Canadian economy has been a bit overdone.
Christine, I think that there's a lot of people who, of course, recognize you, recognize your name, your success. I know you were in Toronto giving a little bit of a speech, or a big speech, a keynote speech in terms of how to really grow brands and be successful.
And if you look at Starbucks, it was really about recreating that emotional connection with consumers at a time, particularly in the 80s when Starbucks emerged, where people were looking for that third place, where technology was taking over their lives. And so Howard really tapped into community, and that connection, and coffee was the medium to do it. When you look at Lululemon, it was about the disruption was really bringing not only beauty and style to athletic wear, but also the retail space.
What would you be doing if you were sitting here in Canada with all this uncertainty running a business? Would you change your course?
I'd have a tendency to say, I'm going to assume this is going to work itself out. The U.S. and Canada are actually the best of friends for a long, long time. I really don't see that changing.
Of course, the last time we spoke was the beginning of the rollout of the Beyond Meat burger, which was a stellar rollout. Who knew a year and a half later, or what? However, it's not even been that long, but that it would be such a huge hit.
We think that if there's a change in the world and we can be part of it and it tastes great, we want to be there, and we ideally want to be there first, and that certainly was the case with Beyond Meat.
Let me ask you what you think about everything going on with President Trump and the CEOs leaving his advisory council, and now the disbanding of the advisory councils.
You have to applaud anyone who stands up against expressions of hatred and divisiveness.
Let me just set the stage a little bit here for our viewers, because I said, is this the first time you two have done a business relationship together? Michael, you said what? I said in 1988, Barry was a condo developer, and I was selling condo units for Barry in 1988-89. You worked for Barry? I worked for Barry in 1988-89. Wow.
And we have been friends for over 30 years.
Okay.
So
you've done a lot of business together, I assume.
Yeah, a lot of friendship business.
It seems as though the company's going down these various channels of being almost a tech services company for the home, for the Internet of Things, for wearables, etc. How do you see the company evolving now for the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Thank you for that, because we think the secret sauce for us is staying closely connected to our customers. If we keep them first and foremost in our planning, in our communication, in our focus group studies, we think that we can always be important and of meaningful value to the customers we serve.
You obviously have the hotel bookings, and you have other verticals to your business as well. Where do you see the greatest growth coming from, or where are you really putting a lot of focus, strategic focus today?
And we know that there is this shift, that people want to go beyond just a typical hotel sometimes, and we need to provide them with that.
You and I have talked in the past. You were looking at Canada to expand more, that this was an opportunity in terms of the current environment and economy here in Canada. What's your sense now?
The last time we were together, I was, I think, more optimistic about Canada than maybe you were. I continue to be an optimist about Canada, not just for our business, but including for our business.
Here in Canada, we are leading the G7 countries in terms of GDP growth. It continues to surprise so many people to the upside. U.S. growth still seems to be quite good, some would say. What's your view in terms of what you're seeing on the ground from the consumers in both countries?
Regardless of the business cycle that we're in, or the health of the economy, or consumer discretionary spending, there's going to be winners and losers.
So it sounds like very much expanding the client base as well to be global in addition to Canada.
That's right. So the days of just being in a retail fund basis, they're no longer. The new AGF, and you can see our new brand as well, which is very exciting.
There's nothing out there right now that is suggesting a recession is imminent. However, when you do take a look, and nothing, it doesn't. You never often see it until it actually happens, and that's the issue.
I agree with that.
But you can also take a look at the landscape and what's going on with respect to the protectionism that is occurring in Canada. Pipelines not getting built, that's one of our key sources of revenue. Doesn't that cause you to pause a little bit?
Well, I think it's caused me to pause for the last 5 years. So I think there's a tendency, we look at our business over a long period of time. concerns about collateral values and the health of our borrowers is something we've been thinking about for a long period of time. So I would say starting 10 years ago, and particularly 11, 12, 13, when we started to get elevated collateral values, we started to tighten up on covenants.
You diversify and you talk about the Rec Room or Top Golf or esports, what have you. Where is entertainment going?
I think, like we call it One Cineplex, where we want to have all the touch points and use our loyalty program, which is now up to 9.7 million members. You know, so that's pretty close to 1 out of every 3 Canadians with the card and 60% of the households.
What was one of the most unexpected first challenges?
Well, there were many. We really tried to focus on 3 things, top of mind, exceptional in-store and exceptional home delivery. And executing on those last 2 was so critical.
Or let me just then get your take in terms of how you actually see the fiscal situation in Alberta right now. What kind of grade would you give it?
Alberta's got this long history of relatively low tax rates and no sales tax. And 15 years ago, many of us could see this leading to a difficult situation. I have a fair bit of sympathy for Premier Notley in the current situation. She inherited this structure of low revenue and low, we just don't have a diversity of tax sources.
The model that Walmart is employing and using as well, the Penguin pickup, might be the newer model?
You know, over time, this may be one of the solutions to that last mile. But drones, I don't think, is the solution to last mile.
Okay.
I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't know what else at the moment we see, because gas prices are high, and you see that the cost of delivery is in fact rising, not falling. So that last mile is, you can't sweep it under the rug. It's a huge issue when it comes to e-commerce.
I have to ask you your view in terms of what's going on between Tim Hortons right now and Burger King. There's obviously a lot of disgruntled franchisees, Tim Hortons franchisees. What's your view in terms of how the situation looks to you and how to rectify it?
Without giving the competition advice, and by the way, I'm very competitive, so you should note that. I think one of the things I've learned over many franchise organizations is the franchisees have a view about what's important for them. The company has a view what's important to them. Sometimes those elements are at conflict.
Doug, from your perspective, would you want to see more? Is now the right time when you look back historically in terms of when you really want to implement larger fiscal spending?
So I think they should take their time and make sure that they're not just spending for the sake of spending. I think a well thought out infrastructure program or something that actually helps the long run potential growth rate of the economy, sure, by all means.
It is a celebration of excellence in the Canadian investment industry, and it is the Morningstar Awards. It is now in its 19th year, and this premier event attracts the best and the brightest on Bay Street with over 500 attendees, and I'm very excited to be hosting this year's Morningstar Awards. There's a Made in Canada strategy behind what we're doing.
We need a full ecosystem to help graduate companies from one level to the next.
I'd love to get your take in terms of what the true definition of responsible investing is today.
The way that I think about that spectrum is that it goes all the way from what I would call is really table stakes today, which is ESG integration. So how are you looking at all the ESG risks out there and integrating those into your investment?
How do you, at the end of the day, vet where you put your money to work?
You like Coca-Cola? Buy it. Unless you believe America is flushing down the toilet, it's going to go back up. I promise you, within a year or two, the Dow's going to be over 10,000. Snickered the experts. And so it came to pass.
We want to get your take right now as it relates to the Canadian landscape and how competitive we are with all your travels and businesses you're involved with.
The challenge, I think, that we have in Canada is going out into the world. I mean, we're a Canadian company. I built a $250 million company out of Toronto. This is still our head office, but we have to go to the US and we have to go to the UK. I think Canadians are extremely competitive, but sometimes we don't go abroad quickly enough.
What advice would you give young entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs?
Before I got into the fitness business, I've been approached by many people about doing a variety of different businesses, but none of them seemed to connect with really what I was passionate about. And I think ultimately, if you find something that connects with you, that's the first step. And I think the second thing for me was finding resources or partners that can help fill in the gap.
Are you thinking instead of a social insurance number that everybody needs to have their eyes scanned, or what are you thinking? You're much more creative and smarter than me.
Well,
what are you thinking?
I think it's probably a little bit dangerous to brainstorm on this broadcast on solutions. However, I would just say that I would say in general, a 9-digit number, or depending on where you live, 8-digit number or 10-digit number is probably not the level of control that you'd want to have for somebody's identity to be stolen. And so we are in a multi-year journey toward providing better security on the web. Each individual company has to invest in this. This is not, one company is going to be able to provide all of the security.
Why did they think it would fail? They said, why would you ever build a product that goes against human nature? Men must talk first. Men are the hunters. Men are the pursuers. But in fact, if they would have taken a step back from those archaic perceptions, they would have realized that men love having a woman initiate conversation. The only reason they're not allowing that is because society doesn't set them up for that.
Right.
So this is something that men and women both prefer. They prefer it. And it's a better ecosystem, it's safer. And then the power of the brand, we can extend into any vertical. We don't have to be just dating.
For companies that might be listening to this and thinking, my goodness, it sounds so complex to get there in terms of offsetting your carbon footprint. How would you advise another CEO to go about this?
It starts by making this a non-negotiable. I mean, this is the problem of our generation. The UN report that talks about the risk of rising global temperatures gives us 12 years. That might not even be enough. And so this isn't a nice thing that you do at the end. This is something you need to bake in as a non-negotiable, and everyone in business should be thinking like that.
And are you an entrepreneur first? And a musician was one of your first businesses. How do you view yourself and your platform and where we go from here?
The entrepreneur or the entrepreneurship, to me, is just a pretty word for a hustler.
I thought I'd end with that interview with Armando, or Pitbull as he's known, in front of a crowd of 10,000 people in Toronto. Because it was such a special request to me. They reached out to me. They wanted a business news anchor to interview Armando in his first tell-all story about how he became so successful as an entertainer and as an entrepreneur. And they trusted me with that. He hadn't been on stage telling his story yet. That was the first time. Now he goes out alone. But I was really happy to be able to do that and hopefully make him feel comfortable. He's obviously so comfortable as an entertainer. Sometimes it's a bit of a different story to tell your story. So I hope that that's something that I can bring to anybody who might have an interest in working with me. And again, it was wonderful to be with him and hear how he came from nothing to an incredible entertainer and an incredible entrepreneur and business person. So I thought I'd leave you with that one.